Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
Let's have a crack.
Let's have a crack. James, welcome to the podcast. How are you, brother?
I'm fantastic, Pete. Thanks very much for having me.
Where are you joining us from in the world right now?
Rightio, I'm in a town called Geelong, which is just about an hour west of Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. So pretty much the opposite side of the world to you.
I'm really excited to have you on, brother, because there's so many interesting stuff happening in the sector now. And this term that we were sort of talking about before we came on around innovation, people talk about innovation a little bit like a buzzword, like it's something they feel they have a professional responsibility to do. Whereas I would argue some of the stuff that you're involved with, but even more so, not just the thing you're involved with, kind of the mindset that it takes for allowing yourself to be open to things like innovation. You ever read a book called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed?
I have, Pete.
Great book, isn't it? You know, stuff like that. And this diversity of thought, because again, diversity, we use it like a buzzword, but really we are sometimes looking for people that look and sound different or a different religious background, but think the same. And then we have the audacity to wonder why we are struggling to solve some of these really incredible challenges. So talk to me a little bit about your approach to innovation, because you visit services all over the world.
Yeah, look, I think groupthink is the biggest challenge we have in our fire service generally. I think we're used to doing things. We're a very traditional organisation, right, in the fire service. You know, I've been in 30 years myself. 30 years ago, we were doing similar things. Now, certainly we've evolved, but have we evolved at the rate of our compatriots in other industries, I guess? And that's the question I keep asking. I guess I'm probably an innovation agitator, I guess, would be the term I use, because I feel, you know, I'm a volunteer firefighter here in Australia. I'm not necessarily a really senior rank or anything, but that means I can ask stupid questions. I can go into an organisation and say, but why do you do it this way?
Yeah.
Well, and the answer I often get is, you know, that's the way we've always done it. So, well, have you explored other opportunities? And the answer is often, you know, not really, it's not my job, or, you know, someone might be looking at that, but it's probably in another area. And you know, we silo our fire services, and there might be a research and development department or component of an organisation, I guess, but they may not even be operational firefighters. They might be, you know, in a shed out the back somewhere. And really the interesting thing I've seen lately, I think there is a bit of a change in culture. I've seen some of the fire services in the UK actually with innovation on their epaulets, where they're actually, it is a rank, or it's a role within the organisation where they're actively looking externally. And when I go and see a fire service, I often ask them, you know, what are they known for? What are they good at? And I've heard some fairly shocking responses to that in the past.
Yeah, you will have.
But really, you know, that's probably the one thing that I'm starting to see is people are starting to look outside, because often fire departments say we're the best. My department's the best at you know, and you say, well, what metrics do you use to rationalise that? Why are you the best?
We just had, you know, Lars Axelsson, Swedish fire nerd.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a big, long conversation with him yesterday. And he was really humble, super honest, awesome guy, because he was talking about, you know, the Swedish approach and all this sort of, you know, fog attack, gas attack, straight stream, blah, 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 blah. And he said early on in his career, when he started to poke holes in that, there was this aspect of resting on our laurels. He said a lot of the Swedish fire service had done some incredible work on the shoulders of people that come before them, but they'd kind of stopped. He felt, you know, he said, and I'm sure I'm paraphrasing wrong, but he said they'd just really given up on, you know, pushing the envelope, really rediscovering, because they thought they'd almost completed firefighting, you know, like it was a level on a game. Oh, we've done that. We're great. Let's all high five each other and let's rest there. But some people would argue that innovation is also I'm going to frame it as a privilege. So in a role previous for me, I did continuous improvement, Six Sigma, Kaizen, Lean, all that jazz, and I loved it. But that was for a very, very, very large international company, and we made loads of products. So we would get dropped into different factories and help with behavioral change, efficiencies, waste reduction. Not because I'm not an engineer, but I was stupid enough, curious enough, and could navigate rooms and conversations to help teams arrive at solutions through a series of exercises and, enabling creative thought, because that can get pushed into a very small box, like you were saying, and if I'm hearing you correctly, as people progress through their careers, there's like a bleed over of, I'm married to the organization. I'm honest. I'm committed. I'm a company man, company woman. I support the values, and within that, if you were to say and admit that you're not as good as you think you are, sometimes that can sound like you're throwing salt at your team, throwing salt at the organization. But in not doing so, you're suffocating yourself from innovation, from progress, from evolution, really.
Yeah, 100%. I think people think innovation is technology. Innovation is definitely not technology. It's a thought process. It's to strive for continuous improvement, as you said. The challenge is that we in any organisation can get comfortable. We don't know what we don't know. We need to surround ourselves with people that are smarter than us, or people that at least challenge our suppositions. And we learn in our industry traditionally from our mistakes. We learn from failure, which is not too dissimilar to most industries. But in our low incident, high risk situations that we sometimes go to, our failures can be terrible.
A failure to us is not a financial cost usually. A failure is someone got badly injured or someone died, is the unfortunate reality of us failing.
Yeah. And we want to create a situation where we're failing safely, learning from those mistakes so that we can continuously improve. And that's probably been a mindset change for me a little bit in my career over the past few years.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
I came from the research space. I was at a university for near on 20 years, and really, I really got interested in how people learn. And I'm not trained in that area. That's not where my further study was. But really, I look at our skills matrix that we all have in life, not just in firefighting, but in life. And I guess I look at it like a traffic light system. I think there's skills that we've just learnt that are fresh in our mind. I look at them as green skills. They're things that we can enact and replicate tomorrow if we're called upon, and it should be muscle memory or something that comes natural to us. There's things that perhaps we think we're good at, but we're probably a little bit rusty. Like, when was the last time you tied a bowline and you do it in the dark, in the smoke, behind your back, sort of? That's probably an orange skill. We'd probably be able to do it, but it probably takes us a bit longer than we should. Mm-hmm. And then there's red skills, things that we either haven't ever learnt, or we learnt them so long ago that they're no longer relevant to us. And to me, skills fade in our services is huge. And we've surveyed organisations around the world, fire organisations, around access to live fire, and there's phenomenal expertise around the world in compartment-based fire training or fire dynamics or whatever. Mm-hmm. But unless we're practicing those skills regularly, we're going to fade.
Very perishable skills, very much so.
Yeah.
I love that aspect, and that might even be the title for the podcast. I don't know, but how to fail safely. That's a really, really interesting concept, because it's so imperative that we do allow in that learning journey the ability for setbacks. But when you get to these very, very high risk scenarios, the margin for error is less forgivable. I think when we train rope access or working at height or whatever it might be, we always say, we can't switch gravity off. So if you get it wrong up there, we can't switch it off. It's the same with swift water and stuff like that. It's like, we can't turn the river off. So if you don't swim aggressively to that eddy, you will go downstream and you might drown. Yeah, we've mitigated the risk as much as possible. We've got a few extra instructors knocking about. We've got a boat down there, but it's not going to get to you very fast, really. And there's still a big margin for error here. So we need to create safe ways for simulation. And again, part of the conversation with Lars yesterday was people trying to find more convenient approaches, like we spoke about gas rigs and synthetic smoke and things like that. He hates them. He's dead against them. And I would agree to a large extent, because you're trying to bastardize your way into something, but the visual and physical feedback isn't the same at all. I mean, not even at all. Synthetic smoke and propane gas or whatever doesn't act the same. The smoke will sit on the floor, and you don't really get any. Propane burners are very clean. That's why we use it, so you don't get any residual smoke from that. So these aspects don't allow for the feedback, and you end up with training scars, even though you think you've created roughly the same thing. Whereas, and we're not going to give up the ghost, some of the stuff we're coming on to talk about today and some of the different learning styles that people are becoming more receptive to, whilst people argue, well, it's not as good as the real thing, or it's not X, Y, Z, or ABC, it's like, yeah, but it's significantly closer than the other physical simulation you've tried to come up with, gas rigs being an example, because you just can't, you're actually trying to manipulate physics, and it's actually very hard to do without actually burning the thing. Do you know what I mean? So when we speak about these different approaches and learning from other organizations, I think now more so than ever is so important, because when you look at examples like Google Maps or Waze, or we had Apollo Gerolibos. Do you know who that is? He's the head of the data science, data analytics team at London Fire Brigade, and he's got a team of 15 people. So, brother, when you're talking about innovation and you're talking about making decisions based on data and integrating some of our systems with external systems, that guy's right at the tip of the sword. But people, I've had some feedback, people love this episode, but some of them also working in other organizations were like, yeah, if only we could have 15 people, working in our data system. So help us understand the limitations of people trying to innovate and trying to reach out and engage in these types of systems.
Yeah, well, I guess I would argue in my experience that London Fire Brigade having 15 people in their data area is phenomenal. But I would almost guarantee that those people would be very happy to share data from their organisation.
They do, and that's why you came on. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so it's really about networking. It's about looking outside. It's about, and we spoke about this before we came on, right? It's about, am I going to just sit in the chair tonight and watch telly, or am I going to write an email to someone that I find interesting in the service on the other side of the world or next door, and say, hey, what exciting things are you doing? Can I learn about it? And that's continuous learning in my book, and something I don't think we do enough of. We're very in our organisations, and maybe I'm being generalist here, we're very negative about looking outside, because traditionally we're the best, right? We're conditioned to be told that we're really good at what we do. You're experts in your domain. Why look outside? Because we're better already.
But that's really crumbled, in my personal opinion, over the last sort of 10 years, because we've rested on our laurels for so long. So when you're looking at these more innovative ways, because when did you said you started 30 years ago? How old are you?
Look, I'm in my 40s.
You don't look that old. You joined when you were 6. Look, I'm blowing smoke up your ass.
I grew up on the fire truck with Dad when back when you used to be able to go for a drive on a Sunday to test the trucks. And
Nice.
when I was probably 3 or 4, as I said, I'm third generation, so I just grew up around the fire service, and we had a junior program that you joined when you were 13 and learned the skills. So effectively, when you became sort of 16, 17-year-old, you start jumping on the trucks and you start responding. And plenty of stories throughout that journey with, I think, 3 uncles in the service as well, and as volunteers. I sort of grew up around it, I guess, but it's the innovation journey is challenging, but I think we've got some opportunities right now. And to me, as I said, it's learning. So if I go back to the analogy I always use, right, is Pete, in your service, how often do you have to wear a SCBA to maintain competency?
Once every 2 years, but I think we've just brought it back to annuals again. And I'll get told I'm wrong about that, but I think they're once a year. Let's say that.
I won't hold you to it, but my service is 6 months, and I know some services are once a month, some are 3 months, some are 12 months, and I ask the question. I go into an organisation, and this is the analogy I use. So, where did we come up with 6 months from? Well, neighbouring organisation, neighbouring fire service, they did it 12 months, and we're better than them, so we'll do it 6 months. Okay, yeah, right. So, other neighbouring organisation does it at 3 months. Are they better than us? Oh no, well, we can't do it that much because it's costly and takes time, and we damage equipment and whatever. So you get into this group think around what's best practice globally, and then you say, well, is there any hard data behind any of this? Oh well, Smithy down the street, he hurt himself and he hadn't trained for 6 months, so probably 6 months maybe. And really, this is the challenge I see as an organisation: is we don't have a lot of comparative data around skills fade. People, and historically, as we said before, it's been because people are injured or worse on the job, and we start to look at training records and say, well, we don't really have a training record. I mean, as I said, I've been an operational firefighter for coming up on 30 years now, and my training records would probably be 2.5 pages of did this course on this date and passed the course. But if I drilled down into it, I'm sure there were things that I could do better. I'm sure there's things that I could improve on. And if I was a conscientious student, I would love to go back and say, well, here's something that I just maybe scraped across the line, or, I got through the course, but I probably should, refresh that. I might have done that course 10, 15 years ago and may or may not have used that skill set since. So, how do we first understand that there's a challenge or a problem, and how do we capture that at the organisational level so we can derive data points from it? Organisational intelligence is key. If we could say that...
It's strange that we don't have a metric for it, though, because when this comes under legal scrutiny, when I think of the Grenfell inquiry or something like that, and they go, right, James, you were the first incident commander in attendance. Let's have a look at your training records. Because it says James has maintained his incident command accreditation, or you were the first team in BA and you accidentally pushed somebody out the window, or you've walked straight past the body and you failed to save so-and-so. Let's have a look if you're a shit firefighter. And as long as you adhere to this arbitrary metric in your service, that's the first box ticked, and they go, oh, well, yep, James did do it every 3 months, or James did it every 6 months, or, well, yeah, Pete did pass his level 1 incident commander reaccreditation last year. And we go, but also, BA, again, is just as one example of many. There's levels of what interaction did you do, and we're going through this in UK with command hours now as well, you can have simulated command hours because obviously it's blind luck if you get to be in charge of a job. So you can do, desktop exercises, tabletop exercises, but even in breathing apparatus, they could say, when's the last time you wore under air? Okay, when's the last time you wore under air and smoke? When's the last time you wore under air and smoke and heat? Was it carbonate? Was it not carbonaceous? When's the last time you shifted a casualty? There is so many metrics, and I've never really thought about that, even though I work in the goddamn training department. And it's I always say this about businesses though, and the services are terrible for it, I think, and I am terrible for it. You're so busy working in the thing, you don't work on the thing. Do you know what I mean? And I think we're so busy trying to churn now. We're just, oh shit, get out the door, get out the door, get out the door. We almost can't lift our head above the parapet. You can't see the the forest because you're stuck in the trees or whatever it is. You're so can't see the picture in the frame. You need to zoom out and go, oh bloody hell.
Exactly, and to me, it's about capturing data, and we use immersive learning for that. But I guess I was always taught, right? Check your hose line, check your branch or your nozzle, depending upon where in the world you are. Check it before you make entry to a door. I challenge you to go and look operationally, or the listeners operationally. How many people are actually doing that these days? How is that muscle memory for people? That was taught to us early days. Check your pattern, check your flow rate, check it all before you enter, and I can almost guarantee that's fallen off for probably 95% of firefighters out there. Is that a problem? Don't know. But at least if we understand that people are doing something or not doing something en masse, and it could be based on demographic, it could be based on location, it could be based on training years since last training, hot fire training iteration, whatever it is. As I said, we're not getting the hot fire training necessarily that we used to get, I don't think.
No, definitely not.
Really, we always talk about simulation, right? We've been simulating burns for years, no matter what we use, unless we've got an acquired burn. And even acquired burn is still a simulation because it's controlled to some extent.
You've manipulated it, you've started it. You've already interacted with the substance, with the thing prior to.
Reduced certain risks that we deemed acceptable to us as firefighters. That's we've got bias in our training because we know what we're going to go into, and that's probably the biggest challenge, which is why we sort of started doing what we're doing to try and unpack some of that and try and get some data from it.
So take me into the early origins of simulation for you. What that means, levels at which you do it to.
Yeah, look, so I guess, I talk about what we do as a little bit analogous to flight training, right? Back in, I think it was 1929, the first flight simulator was created.
Jesus, nearly 100 years ago.
Yeah, nearly 100 years. And
wow.
Then you look through the 60s and 70s and people sort of said, it'll never replace flight hours. And now effectively you can get fully accredited in an aircraft type in a simulator now, right? So that's where the technology's evolved.
Have you been in one?
Yeah.
Bloody awesome, aren't they? Some of the race simulators are absolutely incredible as well. Like the oh man, and the feedback from the vehicles and the tires and the different. Oh man. Anyway, incredible.
So I've been involved at another university spin out here. I worked on it for about 10 or 12 years. Was a product called Universal Motion Simulation, and that's basically a big 6-axis robot arm that you strap yourself onto the end, and you can pull upwards of 6G and fly fully inverted and do amazing things. Now, you can't do that in any aircraft, right? You can't. I mean, stunt aircraft, yes, but what you can do in that is far more realistic than anything you would do in traditional simulators, right? But that's about just thinking outside the box about what we can do in these kind of environments. As I said, we've been simulating fire for a long time. We've been simulating whether it's container-based, whether it's gas-fired props, as you mentioned before, whether it's going and lighting, something on fire and putting it out. It's a controlled simulation. So I guess, my history was I did a PhD in medical simulation, so teaching people what's called haptics, which is touch and feel of virtual environments. So we were doing things like epidurals, lumbar puncture, scalpel cuts of tissue, needle insertion, things like that. So we could train medical professionals effectively how to do something repeatably and feel what you're going to get out of it.
As in feel the way it penetrates the thing, as an example for injection.
Layers, the going through the skin and the soft tissue and into the spinal, all those sorts of things. We can touch and feel and create that force feedback, and train people to repeatedly do something using tactile sensation, I guess. And then, like most PhDs, I sort of during that time I ended up. I'm a robotics guy. I've always been hands-on, very pulled a lot of stuff apart, put it back together when I was a kid. So I started building a lot of robots, and we got into the police and military. So we started building robots for counter ID, bomb disposal, hostage negotiation, tactical units and things like that. And we developed a robot that we could control about a mile away, and we could brush sand off a landmine by feel. It gave us depth perception, stereo depth perception through cameras. which was not very novel at the time. And we could literally cut the red wire, because we all know that you've got to cut the red wire for an IED or a bomb, right? But we could cut the red wire, and we could actually feel that our cutters in our robot manipulator were cutting through the insulation of the wire, and we could strip that wire.
Yeah, the level of pressure that you need to apply to something. That's fascinating. So, like you say, when you're brushing it off, it's feeling the surface friction, surface tension of how hard it should need to push to take sand off, and then it has like a back off level, bit like for people thinking like simple adaptation on a drill, so you don't continually drive the screw all the way through and churn the wood up. You know what I mean? It gets to that certain point of resistance and goes, nope, this should be enough to hold the thing now. Like I shouldn't have to push this hard to get the sand off the landmark. I must be hitting another composite now. I must be engaging with metal or something of a heavier substance. Dude, that's wicked.
You're doing it there. But and look, I guess part of that journey, I spent a fair bit of time on military bases around Australia predominantly, and saw what they were doing in tactical shooting training and teaching people how to shoot. And traditionally in shooting, you just line up and spend a lot of money on brass and send it down range. Yeah. And an instructor's sort of watching over your shoulder saying, Pete, you're doing it wrong, or you missed the target. And that's your feedback, right? But in that situation, they were moving, ADF and other militaries around the world, we're starting to get into the digital space, right? So you've got a replica firearm in your hands. You're shooting in a virtual target downrange, simulating maybe 100-meter range. But then you're getting the metrics afterward, showing your pre and post trigger pull of a polar plot, showing you where you're wandering, how far off target you went after you got the recoil of a shot, before you had to come back on, your dwell time, how long it takes to get back onto target. Things like that. So you're getting data immediately afterwards, and you're saying, well, I'm always pulling to the right every time I shoot. I can change my biomechanics of my body so I can be better at what I do. And
golf's a great example for that as well. Now, mate, I'm having this conversation. I'm like, shit, we're so far behind. Like simulation everywhere. No one is even questioning it. Again, I think it's the book Bounce, wasn't it? Matthew Syed, where he does the... So they took the guy with they thought the highest reaction speeds in the world. I think he was a ping pong player, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. And they go, right, let's see if it is in fact your reactions that are so incredible. So they put him in a tennis simulation or something like that. And then they get the guy who is a world high-level tennis player, a few years retired, I think, but they get him to fire a ball at him and it goes like 110, 115 or something like that. And he misses it completely. And they're not asking, can you return the ball? Can you even just make contact with it? Just get your racket to the ball, because you've got extraordinarily high reaction speeds. They say the shortness of a ping pong table, the speed at which it's being hit, you must have the fastest reaction speeds in the world. And basically what they see is the guy's astonished because he can't even make contact with the ball. But the person doing the data analysis, and you will know the terminology far better than me, but they're using the slow-mo cameras and they're looking at where his eyes are looking. And the problem is he's looking at the ball, isn't it? And so many people that are experts in that space, when they watch professional tennis players they're not looking at the ball. They're looking at that person's shoulder and knee and ankle, and it's pattern recognition, isn't it? They're like, from all of this data I've captured, this is where it's heading. And their body is, even those micro movements, their body's already started to move and rebalance itself in preparation for where this is going. And again, golf, baseball, it's so accepted. It's like, yeah, of course I would. Why would I not use this performance-enhancing technology?
And the brain's amazing at doing that. We're the best at machine learning. Effectively, we practice to get those data sets so that we can learn, so that we have that muscle memory. And if you're not seeing something, look, I'm not talking about firefighting necessarily. When we talk about simulation for firefighting, right, that's the last 10% of what we do. Really, we're training people around dynamic risk assessment. It's all of the other things that you're doing other than putting water on fire. It's about understanding your environment, and you would have seen it yourself, Pete, right? We can have the best, brightest experts in the world teaching people about fire behaviour, and we need to do that continuously. We need to experience hot fire training. But how often can we get those people in front of those experts to be trained?
Exactly.
What can we do that won't get you the same level of fidelity, and we're never claiming to have that same level of fidelity. What can we do that can develop that muscle memory to a point where we can get better training outcomes? And as I said, it might not even be about the fire behaviour. It's about the scene size up. I've arrived on scene. What have I got? Did I notice that there was a TV on in the upstairs window? Did I notice there was a car in the driveway? Did I, what's the time of the day? What's the shadows looking like? What's going through my mind at this point? Or it might be
indicators of wind direction and things like that. Am I picking up on all of these?
What's even after the job, the film crew shows up. How many people, firefighters or incident commanders or whatever, have you seen gone to Jelly and you have a laugh at them?
Public speaking. We don't seem to train them until they get to a higher senior level. It's going to be bloody Pete Wakefield, watch commander, who's the first person there, and they stick a camera in my face, and I go, oh.
And you've seen every police man or woman in the history of TV falling back to that kind of, non-plain language speak around that the public sort of takes the piss out of them now, right?
Yeah.
But that's fundamentally what we're trying to achieve is to develop some muscle memory and get people uncomfortable. If we're not uncomfortable in our learning, if we're not asking tough questions, we're not pushing and extending ourselves.
Not in that growth space, are we? I always say, and I say this with a lot of the stuff we do with the businesses and stuff like that, don't let great be the enemy of perfect. Yeah? Or even sometimes don't let good be the enemy of great. Just because it's not exactly as you envisioned it, but because if you're always they always say procrastination by perfection, it's like you'll never fucking get it done. And I think of that with but I attended a training once in Sweden with whoever, the god of fire behavior, and it was loads better than this. Okay, 100%. I bet it was.
We will agree with you. Yeah,
we will agree with you. So we can't all go there. So rather than going fuck it and saying no, we're not going to do any training at all, we're going to keep saving up for that time in 6 years' time when we can all go to Sweden. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
Look, what I would say to those sort of people too is really we want to capture those people's knowledge. That we've got. Not only do we have skills fade as individuals, we're losing people. Right? We're losing expertise.
Hemorrhaging experience. Yeah, everyone's retiring.
And that experience, we're never going to get it back.
No.
So if we can capture some of that experience in training lessons, training plans that go alongside, a platform, be it a platform like FLAIM or others, how do we capture that experience? Because we always talk about, we sit around the table, the watch table as firefighters, right? We have that conversation. What was the biggest job you went to? What was the curliest one? And the fire, it obviously gets bigger and bigger and bigger each time you tell the story.
Of course.
But imagine if we could capture that in physics-based reality and sort of say, well, this is what I saw when I got on scene. The smoke was doing this. The color of the smoke was doing this. This was the time of the day. And then you say, well, okay, but what would you do, Pete? What would you make the same mistake I made back then? Because I made a mistake, and luckily no one was hurt. I didn't hurt myself, but we got away with it. But it was a bit hairy there for a minute. And look, I use another example I use is we've worked with some navies around the world, and everyone on a ship's a firefighter, right? You're out in the middle of the sea. Everyone's trained in the fundamentals of firefighting, and that might mean that you've been to a hot fire ground and you've done 15 minutes worth of holding a hose and pointing in the direction of the fire
10 years ago. Yeah.
Yep. A lot of navies have to do that every 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, but it's 10 or 15 minutes, right? And we went up to some workups on ship, and I was standing with a training instructor, and the training instructor had a crew come in, and he had a slack clothesline, and he sort of crouches on the deck, and there was a flashing light in a clothes dryer in a laundry on this ship. And, no disrespect to the training instructor, because he'd never seen a fire himself, right? He'd heard it in the past. But he said, look, what's going to happen? And the young, trainee came in and was squatting in such a way that if he cracked open the hose line, he would have been on his back like a turtle pretty quick. Just the biomechanics of the body, he hadn't obviously held a charged hose for some time. But the instructor said to him, and I remember this very clearly, he said, this is going to take thousands of litres of water. It's going to flash to steam as soon as you put the water into this, because there's that much heat and intensity in this clothes dryer fire that, visibility is going to go to zero. You're going to have to be down low and nice and low and so forth. And I'm thinking to myself, your fuel source is a pile of clothes,
Very
20 odd
minimal.
kilos of clothes dryer, you're probably going to knock 90% out of it with a bucket of water. But it was 1,000 litres, right? And it sort of made me reflect, because I'm sure it was probably 100 litres when his instructor told him that same story, or her instructor, and then you just go back and you think, well, the fish gets bigger and bigger and bigger each time they tell the story, much like around the watchroom table.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get a situation where you've got some level of physics-based reality so people know how to expect what they're meant to expect? And that's fundamentally where we sort of came up with this idea from, is that you've got to get some level of realism, but any level of realism is going to make huge improvements over our current training doctrine.
And I think as well, as much as you gave the example there of the spoken word example, like with body-worn camera, with CCTV everywhere now, you can literally, I imagine with others, you can completely remodel that incident and say, right, we've pulled all of this together. We've only got 3 angles, but based on, everything that visual data and echoes and sound presents to us, we've restructured this. So we can take you back through that exact incident, and it will look exactly like it looks on that camera. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because rather than someone going, oh, what would you have done in this situation? Well, you know what, James? Let's run it.
Yeah.
Chuck this on, brother.
Yeah.
So you've just arrived at the incident, you've gone there, and then you just get so immersed in it, and you make the same mistakes. We're all fallible.
I think the movie Sully, the Sullenberger crash into.
Mate, I'm glad you went there. It was on my list. So give people that, because some people won't have seen it, and we'll tell people to go and see it. But give them a full comprehension of what was going on there.
Look, it's based on time domain, right? Time and space. You've got a certain time to make a decision, and the armchair experts will always analyse a video to the nth degree and tell you what you did wrong, of course. But with the time and space you have available to yourself, it's split-second decision-making and dynamic risk assessment, right? Am I going to attempt a snatch rescue? Am I going to go in that doorway, or am I defensive? What's my rationale for making that decision? And the Sullenberger, that was a split-second decision that he had to make. That is he going to try and divert and get to an aircraft to an alternative landing spot or not? And ultimately, the simulators initially showed that he'd probably make it, but ultimately, with the time and space and looking at the data that they had, he wouldn't have, and he saved a lot of lives as a result. Yeah.
I find that aspect of it really fascinating because, if people haven't seen the film, it's obviously about when he landed the plane in the Hudson. It's, I can't forget the guy's name now. Who was the actor that played him? Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so Tom Hanks plays the pilot, and shortly after takeoff, one of the engine gets a bird strike, doesn't it? And both engines get a bird strike. Yeah, Canadian geese or something like that, isn't it? And they very quickly lose control. He has to make these snap-second decisions. Can't reach this landing strip. Can't reach that airport. Can't turn back. And the speed at which that mental processing goes through. And even when they had loads of people go and simulate it. And it's obviously a genuine case. This was based on a true story. And those simulations were so incredibly realistic. And even though people knew what was coming up, they couldn't seem to manipulate their way round it. And that's where these sort of lived experiences and then pile that on top of this immersive training is really powerful.
I think if you listen to the audio from the incident on the river, he was extremely calm, and that comes from experience, right? He has experienced engine failure many times in the simulator.
Yeah, that's it.
He'd never probably had an engine failure before. And look, I know he didn't simulate both engines failing before, certainly not so soon after takeoff. But there's countless examples in the aviation industry. The Glimley glider, I think, was another amazing one where they ran out of fuel, and there's a whole series of events as to why they ran out of fuel. But he had to land on a drag strip, and it was because he'd had experience in the simulator, but also was a glider pilot. So he I think it was a 777 or a 707 or something, but he glided and landed this aircraft on a drag strip that used to be an old Air Force base. But
have you seen Ready Player One as well?
I have. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I'm once again, I'm probably a bit of a nerd, and I guess that's how our company started, is because we sort of came up with a proof of concept, and we took it over to the Consumer Electronics Show in 2017. Our headset supplier at the time took us over there, and we showed it to people, and we got some celebrities that saw it, and we sort of went viral in the firefighting nerd community, and I'm allowed to say that, I think, because I am one.
100%. I'm right there.
So we hit about we hit about 1.6 million YouTube hits in a week, and that was the impetus for the university of which I was part of at the time, to sort of say, well, maybe there's something in this technology that might make a difference in learning. And Ready Player One, and the old Star Trek sort of stuff around holodecks and virtual training environments and learning environments. So that to me, probably is some of the inspiration for some of this work that we're doing, because I think we learn by doing. We all learn by doing, by making mistakes, as I said before. But if we're learning in a tactile sense, that's when we really develop those neurons into the brain.
You want to feel it.
Muscle memory. You want to be hot. You want to get the force feedback in your hands. You want to be sucking air through a lung demand valve,
because that's almost how we paint all those pictures of the map, isn't it? Each of our sensory inputs adds a layer of interpretation, and embeds it more so in our minds. It's like when if you listen to music while you're doing something, or if you stand up, whenever you go to big seminars, they'll get you to stand up and walk around, and they'll get you to do stuff, because it becomes more of an immersive experience. And Tony Robbins speaks about all the data on this. Like, if I get you just to sit and listen, your intake rate is X. If I get you to listen and repeat, if I get you to listen and repeat and move around, listen, repeat, move around, interact with others, listen, repeat, move around, interact with others to music, it's like that level of embedding things. That's why we always have favourite songs from our childhood, and it triggers a memory, because it was so immersive. Or we smell something and we go, I remember this, because it brings all of that additional sensory input, doesn't it?
Oh, look, 100%. And there's some great research that others have done in this space, Accenture and PwC and so forth. And, when we talk about VR and immersive learning, and I talk about full immersive learning as in heat, force, feedback and so forth, not just goggles on your eyes, effectively. They're talking, 4 times faster to learn than the traditional classroom.
Wow.
People are more emotionally connected. They're more focused. They're more engaged. They're more confident. Nearly 300% more confident to apply their skills, because you can learn as much as you like from a PowerPoint, but and ultimately that's what we're fighting against here at the moment. We're not trying to replace hot fire, live fire training.
No.
People come to us and say, you're trying to get rid of traditional hot fire, live fire training, and we say, well, how often do you do it? When was the last time you did it? 2 years ago. So, well, are we really replacing anything there?
100%.
We're trying to replace the books or the PowerPoints or the boring stuff.
It's already been replaced. We're trying to increase the effectiveness of the thing it's already been replaced with. Don't position this as the enemy. That's where I think people really struggle with it. For people that are completely unfamiliar with haptics, so we've referenced it a few times, haptic feedback suits, and could you give us a bit of an understanding of how the technology works?
Look, haptics by definition is it sort of came from a Greek word meaning to touch and feel. So if you've used a phone and you've pushed a button on the screen and it's vibrated, that's a sort of tactile haptic feedback cue to give you feedback to something. We sort of take it a little bit further and we create the jet nozzle reaction force of a fire hose, for example. So we've got a few different ways of learning now, from instant control down to the firefighter. But if you're on the pointy end of a hose line and you're making sort of dynamic tactical decisions around entry points and door entry and whatever it is, you're on a hose line, and as you crack open the hose and start to deliver water, you'll get pulled off your feet if you're not prepared for it. And that act of creating that force onto the body in a similar way to a real fire hose is imprinting into your brain that when I opened this fire hose to deliver water stream through this doorway, or did gas cooling or whatever it is that I did, I get the same impulse and the same force feedback into my body as I would in the real world. And the learning that's associated with what I was doing when I applied that force really helps, helps in understanding what we do. So we talk about kinesthetics. We talk about proprioception, all those sort of big words, but it basically just means that I'm learning because I'm doing stuff that I want to try and remember and develop that muscle memory into the future.
What about the simulations of things like heat and things like that? And
yeah, often gets grouped into haptics, but it's really, to me, that's just aiding in the immersion. So we've got, a vest or a tabard that you wear underneath your PPE, and as you work up to a fire, you'll feel heat in your chest. If you turn around, you'll feel it on your back. If you get down low, it'll cool off a bit, because it's based on, the realism of the fire dynamics and the modelling that we've done of heat transfer rates through the medium, which is most of the time air. And also simulating the PPE itself, obviously. Now, we certainly, there's probably not a battery big enough that we could cart around with ourselves to generate the heat required to give you one-to-one heat feel. Yeah. But it's amazing how much the brain tricks you. We don't actually have to get much hotter than 40-odd degrees Celsius for people to think that they're really, really hot. Mm-hmm. In fact, we can turn the heat off sometimes and people go, gee, I can feel that heat. It's really amazing how much the brain plays a trick on you, even if we just heat the body up by a couple of degrees to thinking that they're in a compartment. And you know yourself, right? You could walk through and apologies for the Americans, I'm using Celsius, but you can walk through a compartment of 800 degrees, 1,000 degrees for a few seconds and you're fine. Yeah. You'll feel a little bit hotter after time, but it's about time and space and, how long should I be in there and what does that mean to me? We can, so we talk about heat, we capture air usage as well. So you wear a lung demand valve.
I think that's a real game changer, because again, it takes away some of that cognitive capacity, because your natural breathing, your subconscious breathing, which is, you push that down into something you don't have to think about. As soon as you put an LDV on or something like that, you put, positive pressure restricted airflow onto yourself. And also that restricted vision, all of that becomes a form of sensory deprivation, I think.
Oh, look, and it changes the mindset of the individual. Once you put your gear on, it's game time, right? It's psychologically, you're in a space where you're now prepared to make decisions that, when you've got your civilian gear on or whatever it is, your mindset is different. It's like gearing up for a sports game. You put your gear on, you put your boots on or your running shoes on. Yeah. Your body is starting to say, okay, I'm going for a
priming.
Run. This is getting yeah. And really, to me, we can also capture things from that, right? So, think back to your initial BA training. It would have been when you're doing a primary search. What are you doing? How many people in the early stages of BA training actually remembered to call out for casualties?
Yeah,
and if they called out, and if they did call out, did they hold their breath for 5 or 10 seconds afterwards to listen for a response? The system allows you to capture all of that and sort of say, well, you did a great job, Pete, but you forgot to call out as part of your primary search, or you forgot to listen for a reply, because you're not going to hear it over your lung demand valves activating and so forth. So just those real fundamentals of firefightership that I think can fade over time.
Not only that, I don't think they're learned consciously either. I think they're either learned by luck over time. Little things like that, because when I'm in there with you, teaching you as a fire behavior instructor or just as a BAI or whatever it might be, I haven't got the cognitive space and also even the time to be able to give you real-time accurate feedback of what even I think you're doing, because I've got a very limited vision and interpretation of what I think you're doing. Because it's pitch black, I can't accurately see what you're doing other than through the thermal imaging. I don't want to fall down the stairs myself. Yeah, I'm also trying not to overheat and burn my ears and my shoulders. So the feedback that I'm giving you is probably subpar anyway, despite my best intentions. And even if I was the god of fire behavior tactics, do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm challenged because I can't really have a natural conversation with you because I'm under air myself.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do an after action review with you after this 10 or 15 minute training interaction, how much have I remembered? Because I'm in gloves, so I probably haven't written anything down because so.
But even for us, like we have the thermal imaging camera reports a video back to a cabin outside, and we have 2 other instructors, breathing apparatus instructors, also commenting, marking criteria, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And they will have, and sometimes the stark differences, and I'm not talking like so-and-so who's just crap and always makes crap notes, but like even people you respect and you respect their opinion, their interpretation of what they saw that person do versus what you experienced can really have some dramatic differences. And you can play some of it back, but also you're limited by the visibility that I gave you from the thing I had in my hand. Do you know what I mean? It's that even that isn't seeing what I'm seeing because it's not got the heat, the noise, the everything else. You've just got the visual from one angle. And often it's too close or too far away or too grainy or whatever. You've not got all of those other environmental indicators to add weight to your interpretation.
And look, we say our system, like any other simulation of training, and training grounds anywhere, as we mentioned before, is a simulation, right? What our system allows you to do is experience the firefight through the eyes of the firefighter. So that's what the instructor can achieve with this system, because they can see. I can guarantee you, rookie firefighters, right, see fire, put fire out, right? It's I see fire over there, I'm going to charge towards fire and put it out. I'm not considering my dynamic risks. And, I often make this joke, and maybe I shouldn't with some of the company that I talk to, but it's I could probably get most people off the street, give them a fire hose on a fire training ground,
of course,
and I'd put a fire out.
Yeah,
but having the instructor there, right? It's about the what ifs. It's about, okay, well, what if this structure's compromised? What are you going to do now?
Mm-hmm.
And we do a lot of what ifs in training, right? I keep talking analogies, right? But I always talk about, I was a book generation. I used to read a lot, and you'd have to imagine. And nowadays with some of the young folk, you put them in front of, and we do what we call stops and props. We go out and we say, okay, this house is on fire. Fire's coming out of this bedroom window, so it's ventilated upstairs. You've got these exposures. This is what you've got, right? And they say, spend half an hour explaining what the situation is before we get to a training outcome, because they don't really imagine the same necessarily. Or you've got 5 people working on the same job and they're all imagining something different. Oh, fire's out. Oh, no, but it's still going over here. Oh, no, it's not. But so, that's what we've done with our teams training, is try to put people in a common environment so that they can get the communications right. Because it might be that, once again, we're not training fire dynamics necessarily, because you might do that in a burn cell or something. But how do I communicate? What's my incident controller's messaging to a fire crew, and what's the response? And depending upon the level of, the level of training of the incident commander or the firefighter, you're going to get different responses, and you're going to have to adapt for that. So you might have an inexperienced incident controller asking an experienced crew, and you'll get the result you want. But the reverse is true. You might have someone inexperienced on the hose line giving you rubbish data back, and you're going to have to rephrase and ask that question again to get the information that you actually need. And that's the learning outcome that you're going to see is people improving their communication effectiveness based on what they see. And obviously one of the other benefits of this sort of technology is you can push pause, and the fire stops, the smoke stops, and the clock stops, but we can have a conversation.
I do very poor simulations of that sort of stuff when I work with a lot of recruits. So we do the old I say you draw, team building style exercises where I've got the thing in front of me and I describe it based on my worldview, and you draw it based on your worldview. And again, the stark differences is incredible because it depends what perspective of life you're coming from, your experiences, your development. Did you ever hear the old fable of the 5 blind men and the elephant?
You'll have to refresh me on that one.
This is a useful one. So 5 blind men walking through the Sahara Desert, and they come across an animal, but they're all walking at different parts of the path so they don't bump into each other. So they all interact with this elephant at a different point. One of them grabs hold of the tail and says, "This thing is a snake. It feels like a snake." And one of them says, No. I've got like a flying animal, because it's grabbed hold of the ears. And he's go, "This is it's a bit like a bat or something like that. I'm not sure." And someone's grabbing hold of a tusk, and it says, "No, I think this is like a rhino." Do you know what I mean? And that everyone is interpreting this thing from a different angle because they don't have the situational awareness, they don't have the shared experience, because again, they're dealing with something in isolation. So when you like talk about delivering a PowerPoint on some of these subjects, you are giving someone a narrow window and hoping they see the big picture.
And look, as I said before, time and space is critical too. So quite often we see in incident control training, right, you'll get a bird's eye view or something, or you get a view that we operationally you might not have, right? So that might be good for understanding how I lay out my operations, perhaps. But on the real job, unless we've got an RPAS or something, you're probably not going to have that view. Certainly not in the first 5 or 10 or 15 minutes or half an hour. So what communication skills can I use? Can I send a crew around the back to get me some situational awareness? How am I going to sectorize my crews? And I'm sure I use different terminology over here in Australia to you over in your part of the world, Pete. But we've all got the same challenges around the world in that we've got limited operational intelligence of what the fireground is doing. I once had someone very respected in the fire industry say to me, I can tell you at any one point in time exactly what the fire is going to do because I'm an expert in fire behaviour. And
that's it. That would be my response.
100%, yes. We model about 400 data points of what the fire is going to do, and we're a mile away from real world.
Yeah.
That's not really what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to give you indicators of what the fire might do and understand where your priority is. Is my priority, the room of origin, or maybe we've injected the sound of a kid crying out down the hallway? What's your decision point at that point? I know what mine is, but is yours the same, Pete? Am I even listening for that? What is my response as an individual to those kind of sliding door moments? Do I do A or do I do B? And it's really interesting to see different levels of experience approach that differently. And it's not always necessarily what you expect too, because as I said, some people that are fresh out of the academy could be better at some of the skills that we've had skills fade apply to us over the time.
Yeah,
so
100%.
I think we can learn a lot in both directions for what we're doing, which is why we get a lot out of it when we've got a cohort of people sitting around watching people in our simulations, because we push pause and say, well, Pete, you've asked for this resource, or this is your radio message. What's everyone else going to do? And everyone gets a learning outcome out of it, because you'll all sit back and probably take the PI 55 out of each other a little bit, but ultimately, I hope you can learn a little bit.
So give us some other examples of places that you've been with this, because I'm looking at the website now, and brother, the number of fire and rescue services, workplace safeties, military, Air Force, airport firefighting, fire and EMS, UK NHS, the applications for this are, there's a French Navy one, I see you've worked with them. This is some really, really fascinating applications for some of this. What was the work you did with the US Air Force? Yeah,
look, US Air Force is probably one of our biggest customers, actually.
Really?
And really, it was FDIC over in the US. We ran into a guy that just happened to be, the head of, the US Fire Service, effectively for their Air Force. And Air Force is a little bit like Navy in that, they train for the high risk, very low incident events like we all do, right? But they might never see a fire in their career.
That's it.
And how do you maintain the interest when you're not getting out of bed each day and practicing your skills necessarily? But so that was about. I mean, I might be, I've managed to get to some amazing Air Force bases around the world. I was at Altus Air Force Base, which is sort of in the middle of nowhere, just north of Dallas, in Oklahoma, I think. This is a training command where you've got 17-year-olds flying massive aircraft that doing an amazing job, and then you've got a fire service there to support them, and so that's a heavy lift training base. but then they might get a fast mover in. They might get an F-35 or an F-18 or something else in, and they've got to understand how to approach that aircraft. So it's not about the firefight, because as I said before, anyone can hold a fire hose and lay down foam on a fuselage. It's about, okay, I've got an F-18. It's been down. It's a hard landing. The gear's up. It's on the runway. You've got a running fuel fire. There's fuel on the wing. There's whatever. There's either ordnance on the wing or there's not. What do you do, Pete? What is it? And it could be a domestic. Could be a domestic fire service that sees this, right? This could be it could be any kind of aircraft that's landed on a civilian road. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but it might happen in your career. But we're not equipped with that. I've never been to a military training. This is what you do for an F-18 that's crash landed in your neighbourhood. But you've got to determine that, okay, the cockpit's closed, so the pilot's probably still in there, right? So my first attack is to blanket the fuselage with foam. Isolate the fuel. Just a 101 firefight. It doesn't matter what incident we go to as a firefighter. We need to apply fundamentals.
Yes.
And the fundamentals are, okay, I can understand what's going on here. I don't really know much about those things that go bang that are on the wings. Probably should stay away from them, but I know that if the fire gets them, that's probably bad. Let's cool them down. And as I said, that's not necessarily what we see around the world when we're training firefighters in our system, because we see firefighters go towards a fire. I don't care about fire. Fire can burn itself out. That can burn the fuel out. That means less cleanup later, right? But what's my priority of attack? Where do I focus my attention with the limited resources I've got, and what other resources do I need coming to support me? And that might be someone that knows a little bit more about it, and I can get on the radio and ask for it, and that may or may not be available to me in the time and space that I have available. But, so that's where Air Force came from. As I think
what frustrates me most about that, as an example, is, as you rightly identify, and I say this about the military all the time, I love the military, I thank them for what they do, they're incredible, but a very small percentage of them will ever deploy to a conflict zone. A very small number of aviation firefighters will ever attend a fire. A very small number of many of these finite scenarios will ever take place. But they seem to either put more time into, more respect to, and are more resourceful when it comes to their training. I mean, like, the military train all the goddamn time. And I think it's something, I always get the numbers wrong, but it's a very low percentage, significantly less than half, ever deploy to a conflict zone. And of those that ever deploy to the conflict zone, a lot of them will be chefs, admin, logistics, administration, other roles. They won't even do the thing. If you are a member of a normal public fire and rescue service around the world, certainly in the UK, because the services are smaller than they used to be, chances are enormously high, in the high 90s, that you are genuinely going to attend an incident at some point in your career. You certainly will attend a fire, you'll likely attend a fatality, you'll definitely attend a road traffic collision, most probably somewhere in the UK. But we seem to have, in places, less of an appetite for some of these innovative training solutions, where I would argue it's where it's needed more.
Look, you run through, some of the companies that we work in. We're in 43 or 4 countries, I think we are now, across all 7 continents. So we went into Antarctica, which I thought was pretty cool, literally.
Oh, mate. Yeah.
But you're right. The fire rescue services are underrepresented in our customer base.
Why?
Massively, because we're very, I came back to before, right? We're very traditional in our thinking. So certainly defence has been a massive early adopter, and I understand that that potentially they've got some budgetary opportunities that our fire rescue services don't. The other one is oil.
Yeah, but everyone's got a budget, haven't they? 100% of your budget is 100% of your budget. I get it's relative to the size of your organisation, isn't it? Usually.
But I think it's the organisations that understand risk probably better. I think fire services have an assumed level of risk, right? We train and accept some level of risk. And I guess myself as a firefighter, I don't think I've ever put myself in a situation where I've thought to myself, this is really risky, because of my level of training was at some sort of level. And everyone has a different perception of what that level of risk is. But But, whether it's oil and gas, and we've got, we do both firefighter training, but also fire extinguisher training, right? And we've got some great case studies of people that have had our training, had a fire, grabbed a fire extinguisher and put it out. And to me, that's a win, And as I say in simulation, right, we'll probably never know that we've saved a life, but I certainly hope we have. And that would be the same for any simulation industry, right? It's
definitely
we're training. That's ultimately
you're training that decision muscle. I always say there's like this activation energy when you realize something needs to be done, and then it's a bit like an energy bar on like a game. It's like it's building up. You're going to make a decision, and then you choke for some people because they think. And again, I can put my head through many trainings I've attended in the past, and they go, right, now we're going to do a simulation. And they go, right, so imagine, Janice, you've wandered into this room. And on your left-hand side, there's a fire. What do you do? And then, no, I go and grab the thing. She's useless. She wouldn't fucking do it. Do you know what I mean? Because she's not here with 15 other people. She's on her own. Yeah. She's locking up at the end of the day. She's not going to do that. She'll end up getting stuck and dying. And maybe he, I'm sure Jeff is just as bad. But it's like what you think you'd do versus what you'd actually do. Very, very different. And police reports are wonderful at showing this. People do some genuinely illogical things because historically our ability for effective immersive simulation was just so poor. And it was just like, it was like a chant. What do we do? Stop, drop, roll. You're probably not going to do that though.
And look, we see a lot of people that don't want to jump in a system in front of peers because we're scared about making a mistake, right?
I sound stupid every week on a podcast.
Tell me about it. Look, I think we have to admit, and we have to learn from our mistakes. But we see a lot of people that will not go in a platform in front of their peers because I don't want to be because I'm the expert, right? I'm the expert. I can't be shown to make a mistake.
Especially in this profession, probably more than anywhere else, because
have we ever gone to a job
I'm a firefighter.
That was absolutely perfect. I would not change a single thing. I don't think there's been a job in the history of the fire service ever, other than a bin fire maybe, where we've said I wouldn't change a thing. Any kind of complex job, there's room for improvement, and that's what we're trying to do is continuous improvement.
And I think with this as well, though, because breathing apparatus is one of the unique aspects for me, where once you go through that door, I don't really know how good you are or not. I can't see it. Once you've disappeared through there, you're very much a law into your own. Your decision-making ability, your stress, your anxiety, your hurriedness, your decision-making logic is completely unknown to me. I can't really pull that apart. So then when you do shine a light on something like this where you can pause, but we've been doing this in incident command training for ages. I say for ages, for a good couple of years. And that has genuinely made our incident commanders significantly better, in my personal opinion. Sim Trainer in the UK is one. I mean, Catherine Lamb's is another. They all have different variations. Nowhere near as immersive as I think it could be, because a lot of it is done just with a couple of screens versus a fully immersive. Do you work with any incident command companies?
Well, funnily enough, we were just at the emergency services show last week, and we did a hookup. So I was here in Australia at 9 o'clock at night, and we had one of our American team members on the show floor at ESS, and a UK incident controller, Paul Spate, all hooked up in the simulation at one time. So three of us, and that was really challenging because we've got start of a joke, right? We've got a UK, an Australian, and a Pommy, an Australian, and an Aussie.
Yeah,
a Pommy, a US guy, and an Aussie, and we're all trying to communicate across the fireground using slightly different terminology because we're all different. We were doing that incident control training remotely. So we had an incident controller standing at the front, did a 360, isolated services, stood out the front on the driveway, and then could see us inside the house, see our torches moving around through the smoke and through the windows and so forth. But then, as I said, the real learning for me in that scenario is how do we communicate effectively? Because once again, we might not be on the same shift or the same crew, and I'm going to ask things slightly different as an incident controller, as a firefighter, than you will in your part of the world, because we're all slightly different, right? We all have our local dialects, perhaps, but ultimately we've got to try and get to the same level of success. You know, I might not work crew beside me day in, day out necessarily. I might have a reliever come in. How can they work with me? And we might get into a situation in the future where, you know, Pete, you're going to move to another district or another firehouse, whatever it is. And before you do that, you're going to jump in with your crew around an incident and just run a few jobs. And we're just going to get used to each other about how we operate. And you know, that remote training facilitation, I think, is certainly something that comes from this platform as well too. You can have the best fire behaviour specialist or the best door entry specialist in the world working with your crew in your station. You'll see each other as avatars in the virtual environment, but they're standing with you beside the door saying, I position myself here because I'm an expert in this. I'm going to position myself here, and I'm going to tell you, based on my experience, this is the best place to be based on this building, you know, construction type fire behaviour that we can see, observe through the windows, whatever it is, you know, and you can look outside your organisation for expertise. And I probably use a Tesla as I'm good with analogies today, I guess. Tesla, you know, we reached out to Tesla in the early days and sort of said, well, look, we'd love to bring some of your vehicles into our simulation so we can train people for the what ifs. And they said to us, no, look, never happen. Our cars don't catch on fire. You'll never be a problem. So we prefer not to associate our brand with your product. And a year or so ago, they did a 180, and they came back to us, and they've got some amazing learning guides now. And they came to us and said, we want you to show what happens if a Tesla is involved in an accident. You know, someone else's fault, obviously. But, you know, what is your response? And at least we can stand around a virtual Tesla that's on fire or not and say, well, what's the isolation procedure? How do I approach this vehicle? What's my concern? What's the what are the indicators of off-gassing? If a battery's going to thermal runaway, we can at least have that conversation, and we can have it in a safe environment, and you know, we don't have to have a vehicle at our fire station. We can have that conversation, you know, across all shifts.
I think that's a really powerful aspect, and I didn't even think to go there with that because when these all sorts of lithium-ion batteries go into thermal runaway or start dumping this toxic gas, understanding people's real-life decision-making elements there, I think would be super, super vital. Really, really vital. Something I'd love to see a bit more work gone into. You mentioned Paul Spate there. Who are the sort of people championing this in the UK? Because I know Paul quite well. He's recently retired, I think, a couple of years ago, maybe last year, I can't remember. What's going on in the virtual reality space or simulation space in the UK? Because I know historically a lot of the stuff that Paul Spate did was around road traffic collision simulation, I think.
Yeah. Look, I think, to be honest, it's been fairly new for us into the UK to really reach out. But so Ted O'Brien works with us now in the UK. So Ted joined us, I'm going to say a year ago now. And you know, he is extremely passionate about creating the opportunity for people to think differently in the fire service from a training perspective. You know, he worked for the Fire Service College for many, many years, and you know, I think it's great that, you know, probably our biggest supporter in the early days is you know, a guy called Jeff Godfredson here in Victoria, who was the chief here in Melbourne. He's in his 70s now. He joined us about 5 years ago at the early stages because, you know, he hadn't been on the end of a fire hose for a long time, but it brought back his muscle memory, and you know, he is connected internationally. We've done a lot of work in the US, probably less so in the UK, but there's a number of fire services that are really starting to think outside the box from their traditional training, and we hope to see more broader adoption over the next few months.
Next few months, wow. So what's the best place for people to get in contact with somebody like Ted? Because again, about 78% of our listenership is certainly UK. And for people to want to experience a simulation such as this, what's the best way for people to reach out?
Look, just head up our website at flaimsystems.com. It's FLAIM systems.com. And we can schedule in a demonstration. Look, this system really needs a demonstration for people to understand.
Yes.
As I said, you know, we sort of started this company just prior to COVID. We were lucky enough to get some distributors around the world that were still able to sell and move product. And And really, COVID probably helped us because it probably decentralized training a little bit.
Yep.
It probably made us think that, maybe the centralized go to a training ground every X amount of time, isn't the only way to deliver training. So, we talk about a system that shows up in two boxes, right? Two little Pelican cases, set up in 10 minutes, do some training, do a 15-minute interaction with your crew. It's not about, gone are the days of doing 2-day courses, I think. I think, the next generation wants micro-learning. They want short, sharp learning, keep people focused, keep people engaged, put it aside, go and, I might be operational. I've got to go to a job. Okay, let's come back, do another 15 minutes. That's the kind of training that's going to make a difference for our skills fade moving forward.
Yeah.
But
bite-sized training, always.
Bite-sized
regular touch points, regular interaction with this sort of stuff.
And look, and then look at the data, see if it's making a difference. Understand what mistakes people are making regularly. And we're not talking about massive mistakes. We're saying, well, look, did you do a proper 360 of this property if you're instant controller? Did you notice this exposure? Did you make the right radio call at this point? And they're easy things to fix, and we just push reset and go again.
Mate, I absolutely love it. So we will include for people to go and have a look. There is obviously the software releases is already happened. There's examples that people can go and have a look at. So there's the fire and rescue trainers on there. There's the workplace safety extinguisher trainer stuff on there. I've seen many iterations of this software myself, and it's something I'm really trying to lean more into. Certainly live it in a training school now, and having done a lot of the courses and the tickets over the last 24 months, and also interacting with a lot of these specialists across the world, I think simulation is, well, and again, I even nearly did it myself, tripping into that thing, saying simulation has a place. Simulation also, everything is simulation. It's just training. We're simulating all the time, but there's truly immersive version that we're able to present to people now. And also, I think we are not alone in developing this. And what I mean by that is this is not something that the first responder community, emergency services, even fire and rescue service community is having to pour time and energy into separate and in isolation from the world. We are benefiting off the backs of the gaming industry and all these technological advancements that are happening so much these days.
We're finding ourselves really engaged with the organisations that we work with. We're not selling a product; we're working collaboratively because this is going to be changing the industry. And as I said before, I think everyone that is an adopter of a technology solution or an innovative way of doing something is really willing to share their experiences to help others take the journey that they've been on. I think so. We've got our Chief Customer Officer, Fiona Ward, working very, very closely with fire agencies around the world to map against curriculum, to capture the data out of our platforms, to make sure that it's in alignment with your local requirements. And there's customization of what we do to make our product better. And really, that's what gets me out of bed. That's what gets our development team out of bed is understanding where the gaps are in traditional training and trying to make it better. And ultimately, that's what it's all about. It's trying to make our life easier from a training perspective so that we get more reps and sets in. And as I said, we make mistakes safely.
That's the perfect aspect there, brother. Making mistakes safely and the reps and sets. The ability for people to cruise, to self-deploy in a sustainable and effective way without having to ask permissions and travel tens of miles to a fire behaviour place and carry out all these risk assessments. It's not talking about replacing that. The service is already delivering that for you, but your opportunity to access these types of resources on a more frequent basis is exactly what I think we need to see more of, because we are not getting that operational experience now, but when we do have it, they are some fairly catastrophic incidents. And some of the incidents in the last couple of years, from wildfires to high-rise incidents to aviation incidents, they're not going away. They're becoming less frequent for sure. But our skill set, that's almost like the less exposure operationally, the more you do need to enhance and dial in. And again, I echo back to the beginning of our conversation, acknowledging our colleagues in military, aviation and other aspects there, where I think they really are significantly further ahead in their openness to these new solutions.
It would appear so, Pete, yeah.
How do I get in contact with Ted? I want to get in contact with Ted and spend some time with Ted.
I'm
so
sure
I'll ask you to connect me after that.
100%, yeah. Look, he's
beautiful,
he's a great guy. guy, and he's travelled all around Middle East and Europe, and he's done some amazing things for us over the past 6 months or so.
Brother, maybe it'll be a future conversation with Ted. But look, thank you so much for your time today, mate. I know you are the other side of the world. It is the other end of the day for you. So I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got young ones that you need to get away to as well. But thanks so much for coming on today, brother. I really appreciate your time. And we will put the links for people to go over and check out FLAIM Systems. Just look in the notes for this podcast and you'll be able to find it there.
Really appreciate your time, Pete. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests. And as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, and please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.